Next thing I know, I'm signing an NDA, wasn't allowed to say anything to anyone, not even my manager or their manager, and meeting with Microsoft chief scientist, two other GPMs, and we were about to get our minds blown.
Our guest for episode 16 is Yasemin Cenberoglu, who was the first designer to work on Microsoft's Copilot, all in secret, before the world was even exposed to ChatGPT for the first time.
It was really innovation in its purest form with almost no limitation. And to me, as a designer, that was absolutely a dream coming true. Like, when does this happen? We had to be bold, brave, try new things, and we were allowed to.
Yasemin is a principal design manager at Microsoft, leading the Copilot product for Teams meetings, calling, and devices. She's the first designer to shape what Copilot is today. Previously, she served as the director of design at Digitalist. Yasemin is also an advisory board member at Idea School of Design at Capilano University. She studied in Germany and then at Cal State in the Bay Area.
We had to start from a clean slate. What we first had to do is to study what it's capable of, at least to a certain degree, and ask our engineers or the OpenAI experts and let them show us what it can do.
In this conversation, we discuss her experience as the first designer working with Microsoft and OpenAI to create the first Copilot, the blue sky innovation and challenges being the first to work with GenAI as a design material, service design, and how the discipline provides an advantage to designers working on probabilistic experiences, and lessons and approaches for when to build a Copilot versus an agent versus a chatbot. Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. We interview leaders and practitioners at the forefront of AI. If you like this episode, please remember to leave a rating and to follow us on your favorite podcast apps. You started your career in Europe. What do you find are the major differences between design in Europe versus North America?
Thanks so much for having me. I had early insights of some of those differences when studying design in Germany at a very Bauhausy, Swiss design-oriented university, and then also in the San Francisco Bay Area, where it was much more about free experimenting and finding your own style. And I could talk a lot about this and the cultural aspects of it. I think design in Europe, or if we specify it for product or maybe service design, the emphasis that stood out to me early on were always the human centricity and co-creation. And there's almost a socialist approach to it, if you will. While user-centered design is also important in North America, I felt there's a stronger focus on business impact, and it's easier to innovate and push the envelope when it comes to investing in wild ideas and actually landing them. And many countries in Europe are more risk averse than in North America, and you can really feel that in many aspects of daily life and business life, and that impacts design as well. Of course, there's always exceptions, and with more and more diverse teams and remote working and collaboration, I think those lines become more and more blurry.
For you, prior to joining Microsoft, you were a service designer. How did you find that really helped you prepare for working on AI products in particular?
Having service design methodology helped me to first overcome the initial big unknown. So first of all, co-creating with OpenAI and MSAI experts and our business partners was essential at the point. It still is. And since we're building a tool to help co-creation, we had to be our own guinea pigs and build off of our own experience, since the access to customers was inhibited at this stage, even to fellow colleagues. So that really helped. And just tools like creating a service blueprint with a holistic view of our products help in identifying opportunities for AI and potential pain points. And blueprints really help, especially because in this case, it was crucial to understand what's happening in the back end and how the AI is influencing our front end. So there, it was helpful to map out customer journeys, highlighting potential touch points, and also trying to identify areas beyond the main product. In what space else than the one that we chose can AI enhance a user experience? For example, let's say, what if you walk into a meeting room and it's connected with your devices and the devices that are in there? How could we use AI and the product that we're building there? What's their value drivers? And then obviously, rapid prototyping, testing was a gigantic must do.
This Design of AI episode is brought to you by PH1, a research and strategy consultancy that helps clients build AI products that customers want. Contact them about product discovery research to answer critical questions about what to build, competitive analysis to find out how to gain an advantage, service and customer analysis to identify the best use cases and value drivers, and workshops and concept testing to validate what will work and to fine-tune products. PH1 has worked on products for Spotify, Microsoft, the National Football League, Dell, Mozilla, Bell, and various health and higher education groups. Bring in an expert to make sure your products and teams are focused on what customers want. Visit their website to book an intro call, ph1.ca. You and I met 4 years ago. We were trying to launch a service design network chapter in Vancouver, and it didn't work out necessarily. And part of it is this US versus European divide where North America is so focused on outcomes and Europe is still focused on the process. Nonetheless, I was very shocked when we reconnected and that you said that you happened to fall into being the first designer working on Microsoft's Copilot. Now, obviously today it seems like everyone is building a Copilot for this or that, an agent for this or that, but you got to work with OpenAI and you got to work with these tools before pretty much anyone else. You could tell us a bit what that experience was like, how you fell into the project, etc. It'd be wonderful to hear.
It was a healthy mix of terrifyingly tapping in the dark and the excitement of a purely creative process and having to truly trust in your intuition. It was really innovation in its purest form with almost no limitation. And to me, as a designer, that was absolutely a dream coming true. Like, when does this happen? We had to be bold, brave, try new things. And we were allowed to. So that was the cool thing. I was telling myself when it happened, this is how it must have felt like when the internet was born. And it all started by saying just yes to the unknown. I was asked by one of our leaders at Microsoft Teams if I had time to work on something new. And I just had finished my latest project. It was about dealing with intelligent devices. And I was like, sure, what is it? And he said, I don't know. It's confidential. And next thing I know, I'm signing an NDA, wasn't allowed to say anything to anyone, not even my manager or their manager, and meeting with Microsoft chief scientist, two other GPMs, and we were about to get our minds blown. Here we are, 2 years later, and it was extremely exciting, fun. I'll always cherish the time. And I can remember when they first showed us what it can do, what blew my mind was not just how accurate the translations or the summarizations were, but how creative it seemed. And that was almost scary. And that kind of immediately put me in a state of like, whoa, we need to be cautious here. It's super fun and exciting, but it almost felt sentient. So there was some sort of science fiction becoming reality in that moment.
You mentioned the idea this is innovation as its truest form. How do you know where to start? Design is a broad set of tools and methods, but when you're faced with this level of ambiguity and this amount of potential, how did you narrow down where to go, what to start with, what to map out, what questions to ask?
If you can imagine, that technology was so powerful and so expansive, but also really raw. We had to start from a clean slate, and we had no ideas. What we first had to do is to study what it's capable of, at least to a certain degree. and ask our engineers or the OpenAI experts and let them show us what it can do. And from there, we try to define value drivers of where and how this could be helpful to our customers, in what context it aligns with our identity and goals as a company. And we had tons of ideas, not a lot of time. So we immediately had to narrow down our scope quite a bit and look at areas that are easy to grasp for people, pretty much everyone new to AI, and it had to be something that felt tangible and also feasible to build and test within just a couple of months. So we decided to place it in a strong product within our customers' daily routine. And we were envisioning an assistant to be part of a team's meeting lifecycle. And we actually reenacted meetings and ran the tech simultaneously to figure out how it could help us brainstorm or collaborate in a meeting, and just to get the juices flowing, and experiencing firsthand how it could accelerate our idea flow and how much positive energy it sparked and how effective it was. It was a huge validation just to us at first. And then from there, we got our ideas. We try to focus on major pain points where people could use just a little layer of convenience, and where we all sometimes wish we had a personal assistant that can support us. And that set us up to be ready to build high-level hero scenarios. Some of them, like, I'm running late. We've all been there. And instead of disrupting the meeting and asking people what I've missed, I can now ask Copilot to give me a recap of the last 10 minutes. And it can detect that I'm late, so it can already give me the recap right away in my private panel. So I don't have to go that mile, and I don't have to embarrass myself or miss even more of the meeting while interacting with the AI more than I need to. Or I'm stranded with my creativity. Give me an idea of a topic, visualize it in a table. We had so many much more sophisticated ideas and integrations so that the system could actually handle. But in favor of time, we really had to dial back.
I'd love to touch on that in the blue sky concept, right? You're saying that you had a lot of big ideas that could have been implemented. And one of the biggest challenges with R&D projects is obviously what horizon to target. Are we targeting something that is extremely feasible or lower in the feasibility and much more desirable? Can you speak to how you manage that kind of dynamic? Because a lot of design today is very structured and it's very procedural to such a degree that designers don't have much input on what the vision of a product is. I'm assuming this was a very different circumstance for you. So how did you and your team define what horizon you were targeting and what was still on the table versus not realistic?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we didn't want to shoot to the moon right away, just because even a glimpse at what this can do was already such high value to us and what we believed to our customers that we were okay to maybe start at Horizon 2, where you're introducing something, or it is the lower end of Horizon 3, where you're introducing something new to a customer, but it's still based on something that they know. So it's still within the medium frame and they know how to chat with people. And we wanted to simulate that. But then sprinkling in this quote unquote magic that before people haven't experienced. So this is where we kind of drew the balance of, okay, what in this really limited time frame can we build that still has so much impact and shows where we can go and shows all the extensive creativity or the new parts of the AI that are different from what we know from ML and all the and the chatbots. That's, I think, how we landed there. So start with a smaller set of skills that's just for you private. And now later on, we'll expand and let the group have access to Copilot more.
I love that in speaking about it, you are often using the user's perspective. I don't want to look bad when I walk into a meeting late. Help me to summarize what I missed so I can jump right into it, right? Really looking at the user's needs and the perspective of that person and how to bring value to them. And also, it sounds like what you were saying is you've taken the approach of really laddering up towards you can do something bigger. We've had a lot of designers on this podcast who are working with AI products, and often the comments are about how, especially starting out, because you're learning the tech, you have to teach or train people how to use it or why to use it in the first place. And it sounds like you really think your service design background really helped with that. What would you say, though, from this experience they've had over the last 2 years, what are some of the most challenging lessons that you learned, or areas that you sort of hit a wall and had to pivot?
It is difficult. I can relate with everyone working on AI products. And there's always this blank canvas phenomenon where you're starting from scratch and like you seem to have all the possibilities and options and you don't know where to start. I think Gen A represents a paradigm shift in AI. And even if you've worked in the field before, all the traditional ways of developing, evaluating, understanding, and deploying ML systems or AI systems as they were before, they don't longer apply. Even though I had the privilege to work with extremely smart scientists at MSAI and OpenAI, the reality was that to all of us, this was brand new and it was a black box. So we really just had to try and fail fast and continuously. We were coming at it with a very Socratic attitude. We knew close to nothing. And I remember 3 major lessons. The first one, we've heard about this before, was when we first saw hallucinations being formed in front of our eyes. It opened the door to just all the things we could possibly predict. One of the first moments it really clicked how this is the shift from deterministic to probable. And it was quite scary to see at first. It just gave us the idea of how potentially harmful it could be. And then we needed to immediately put boundaries in and quite a lot of filters and meta prompts, especially when it comes to the business context of the products. And then the second one is a funny anecdote. It was when we released to Europe, we got a message from an upset customer who used Copilot in a meeting, and it had given them all sorts of NFSW gibberish during their meeting. This happened because their meeting language was different to the language that was set for Copilot. It turned out to translate to rather obscene comments. We had to build a speed bump so that when you turn on Copilot, you have to confirm or set your spoken language. So this doesn't happen. We have to be prepared to change things fast and always. The third one, and maybe the most challenging one, if I think back, it was within the first month or so when we still experimented a lot and the tech was still unpredictable. We steadily guided it to more filtered responses and tried to fine tune it as much as we could. And there was one pivotal moment when we had to shift our complete model because of legal recommendations to not use free text to chat with Copilot. So we couldn't have a text box where we type in to ask Copilot questions. So now we had to figure out how in the world we could interact with an LLM that's not conversational. We defined meeting types and then prompt engineered for potential relevant questions one might have in a meeting. And then it could suggest you how it could help you in the context. So we built this huge dynamic prompt tree of assumptions to help us navigate through different meetings and pretty much reverse engineered them, which is bizarre if you think about it in hindsight, because if you know the nature of GenAI and its unsteady nature.
Thinking about, again, exploration, was there any academic research? Was there other R&D groups that were sharing information freely? Was there some sort of internal lab mechanism where you could test in controlled environments, or was it just straight R&D into the darkness?
There was R&D. It was not a lot and also very raw still. What we did a lot was just testing on the raw, like it was almost like a terminal, like very raw developer screen. You put in your code as your question and it spits out. So you could understand the type of content you get, but not much more. We had sessions with our scientists to ask all of the questions, MSAI and OpenAI experts on it to guide us a little bit.
Given that you are a service designer by nature, I'm curious about what did you find was particularly helpful once you were able to start putting something in front of users? Was there a method or an approach that you found was the most valuable?
Yeah, so again, in the beginning, we were a group of 3. And then after maybe a month or so, we could open the curtains to more people. And then they were our customers or they were our testers. It was fine because it was new to everyone. So if it works for them, it works for our customers. We just continuously, we tried to give as many people as possible access to our prototype. So we had a rough prototype that was working in meetings in your team's application. We incorporated feedback loops from there. So manual text fields, thumbs up, thumbs down, that people could give their comments on. And then attached to those, we had their prompts and we had the output and the performance rate and all that. So this was a really helpful tool in the beginning. And then once it was announced, where we got a private preview, when we got to talk to actual customers, there were always nuances or details that we had to tweak and adjust with legalities coming in place, like new regulations because of AI. So we had to constantly change things or cater to those.
I like your way of just getting it in front of people as quickly and as often as you were able to. Given that design is iterative and AI in particular is very iterative and always learning and evolving, if you could go backwards, how would you have done, or what would you have done differently if you could do it all over again?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit. When we built it, we had to create these mental models and principles of how customers perceive Copilot, how to interact with it. And again, we didn't know how it would play out. So our approach was to bring in known interaction patterns. So we had some sort of hybrid. It's your AI assistant. It's clearly not a human. We also don't want it to be a human, but you can engage with it just like with a person in a chat. But it also has an app-like appearance. Thankfully, intuitively, our customers got it. And especially with the rise of ChatGPT, it became a learned pattern. But in terms of futures thinking and scalability, it can become limiting or even confusing to use a hybrid framework like that. And when we want to build on top of it, might get really complex, especially when more products within Microsoft and outside of Microsoft start to build their own copilots, like offering of third-party copilots and the building kit. It soon becomes a complex problem in keeping a coherent experience. It would be just flooded with copilots everywhere, and you would see the Copilot logo everywhere and different bots talking to each other, and it could be quite noisy. And if I'd had more time, I'd love to have set stricter guiding principles maybe for internal and external builders with a maybe less flexible framework, but one that's more open-ended, if that makes sense.
That segues perfect into what I'm hoping to talk about, which is the impact on product teams. There's been numerous people we've been talking to about how these tools, this technology, this new material is forcing change and how they have to work with each other. Not only do you have to go from deterministic to probabilistic design, you also have to operate from the assumption that the data and the outputs aren't always accurate, that you need to train this thing, that you need to educate users. What do you feel product teams need to learn or learn how to adopt to be successful in this new era of product?
Yeah. I mean, you just said it. People feel like they need to work more together. And I think now is the time to become truly cross-disciplined. If it's PMs, scientists, designers, engineers, customers, we are all on the same footing by now, and we are all still learning together. So I think we need to, first of all, embrace the unknown as a team. Besides that, we can still leverage known processes and measures when building a product with AI. So there's a reliable way to give you confidence that you can still do it. Is there today a silver bullet for success? Probably not. I don't know it, but that's also not exclusive to AI. I think what you can control is what you make part of your process. And I can say it with my service designer's hat on. It's co-creation, prototyping, fast testing at its best. Now, today, thankfully, there's already a certain knowledge base of LLMs out there. So testing is becoming much easier than it used to be 2 years ago. Listening to a diverse set of perspectives and incorporate feedback loops while your product is out in the wild is an extremely valuable way to learn. Tweak your LLM based on that, based on the telemetry, and don't hesitate to release a product when it's not perfect. I think that's something that people are scared of, and that's the beauty of an MVP. Just put it out there, see what people think, and be prepared for surprises and to fail, and that's okay. But that's just the time we live in. Have polished communication, add disclaimers, let your public know what your AI does. We just still need to do a really good job in educating and guiding people without overwhelming them. And ChatGPT just passed a Turing test, which is proof that it can pass as a human with its responses. It's huge. It's the first time an AI could pass it. So maybe if we take that as an analogy, it make it easier for us to design for it. Like, how would you design for a person? Like, how would a person react? What would you ask a person to help you? These models are so large and interactive and nonlinear. It's kind of like the same way our brains work. And to most of us, it's not fully necessary to understand brains like a surgeon, but we still can design for them and understand how to use them. And I feel like GenAI is similar to that. So we kind of know how it could react. Let's try to design for it and learn from it if it doesn't do so. But, big but, please don't mistake this with actually personifying or trying to humanize the AI in your product. That's not what I mean. We don't want another Clippy 2.0. Might not land well with your customers.
For anyone who doesn't remember who Clippy was, it was a Microsoft tool that appeared in the Microsoft Office suite. What was that, late 90s? And it's very meme-worthy, but well-intentioned. And it's a great example of the next big threshold here, which is what is it going to take for copilots to get mass adoption? Right now, Microsoft's Copilot is by far the biggest. A lot of people refer to GitHub's Copilot, but what is it going to take to get Copilot to such a point where people really want to use it rather than are just testing it out?
Yeah, this is a good one. I see multiple layers that play into this here. There's still a lot of organizations and individuals that don't trust AI in general and don't want it to reason over their output and input. The hallucinations aren't helpful, and science fiction isn't helpful, or like deep fakes, fake news, the whole train of Gen AI, voices and videos doesn't help with this anxiety. So building trust and comfort to let AI help you is still one of our biggest and hardest assignments. Although I do believe that the mainstream is already getting used to the idea that AI may be an integral part of their future. And like so many things in life, adopting something new and unknown can feel scary or make you suspicious. That kind of like lays the ground for the next topic or the next, which when we look at copilots as a specific type of AI, today it's built on top of an existing product and they're tied to a license and tied to a specific scope. And that could be a limitation for the future. Or the opposite, like I mentioned earlier, because open source and all of a sudden every touch point can have a custom copilot, we could be flooded by them. And it just becomes you don't see the forest for the trees. So we really need to make sure we stay flexible and grow and keep reevaluating our value drivers and capabilities and the ecosystem we let it operate in on a constant basis. Otherwise, co-pilots will be water under the bridge.
You touched on something that I think is really vital just across the board when it comes to AI, and that's around trust. How would you recommend going about building that trust?
Yeah, we're constantly trying to figure it out. And this is also where I think psychology plays a big role, and talking to responsible AI experts and also our lawyers. I recommend to every product team to run your ideas by a lawyer that's specialized in AI these days. Because first, we need to inform ourselves to know what we are presenting to our customers, and then we can reassure to communicate that in a way to be transparent and knowledgeable and accountable.
So, Yasmin, a lot of people listening to this are not designers, they're researchers, they're writers, they're PMs, they're part of the classic product org. What do you think their evolution is going to be in terms of successfully implementing these kinds of technologies? Because a lot of the conversation so far has been designing for the system, right? But where do researchers play into this? Where do writers play into this? Where can the PMs play into this?
I work really closely with product managers and engineers as well, and researchers and content designers. So I think it's crucial now to do a lot of collaboration. So we are building our product vision with product managers, work together with our engineers to see what they can do when it comes to early ideas. We create prototypes and work with our researchers to test those and just the concepts first. And along the way, we always work with content designers to help us tweak the language we're using. They are working with a legal team often and with marketing and branding. So everyone has to work across the board with all departments. AI is so complex. I think it needs to be all hands on deck.
We've touched on several times the influence of service design in terms of looking at the system holistically. And just now you ran through an example of how the team needs to work through a set of problems together. One of the dilemmas when I look at service blueprints, which is the classic tool of service designers, is how do you implement them with success when you're dealing with probabilistic design? How can you map a system that goes from a finite set of outcomes and endpoints to one where you quite literally cannot predict what the endpoints are?
Yeah, this is an excellent question because it's exactly what I went through. And the disclaimer was always, this is all based on assumptions and intuition. Take it with a grain of salt. Let's run with this first, see if it holds truth. And if not, let's adjust the service blueprint and adjust the different pain points or needs, and then go again. So we had to do this thousands of times, pretty much. So it is a very fluid process now. Service blueprints in AI can't work as they do with a traditional product. They need to be dynamic.
I have this theory that service design kind of failed in North America because there was no application to the theory. The service design artifacts are snapshots and they're lagging indicators in an organization, or they're aspirational states, right? They're not adaptive, they're not generative in many respects. So I think there's something fascinating there about how to document literally dynamic products. Now, AI gives the application to literally holistically impact end to end in an organization. But in what ways does services design need to evolve as a methodology to adapt to now actually having the tools to have change?
Oof, I think I need a little bit of time for that one. I think the way service design is today is it's taking a problem space where you assume there are multiple points. Most of the time, what I've seen in North America is when applied to a product itself, people didn't really get the point of service design and how it could help you, the values of the tools. And oftentimes, people were overwhelmed by the workshops and the information of the documentation. With AI, I think if we tweak the tools to be more dynamic, to be applied to a more dynamic process, I can see value.
How do you map probabilistic journeys? I think that's really the most
Mm-hmm.
important thing, because is it just having 10 service blueprints? Is it having off ramps of one service blueprint to another and to another? Because there's like an infinite amount of error states, but there's only a couple of positive net outcome end states, right?
Yeah. And looking at blueprints in a probabilistic environment is hard, because how do you surface dynamic changes in a static blueprint? So there has to be some way to, like a version control of a blueprint, or a set of different multiple ones. Maybe there needs to be a new blueprint for AI that's more like a tree.
Rather than think of it as a blueprint, which is quite fixed, right? It's almost like we need to be able to figure out like service boundaries, like what is the top and the bottom boundary of that, what would have been a service blueprint that would be acceptable.
Yeah, totally. And I think maybe the layer where what's happening in the AI needs to evolve, or needs to get a different focus than what the back end does today, because it is very balanced today in a service blueprint. You look at the front end, you look at the back end, and it doesn't often get a lot of spotlight, what's happening in the back end. But now AI is the spotlight. So I think we have to make adjustments, or we have to see how we can take the dynamic nature of GenAI and AI in products and move the blueprint concept towards it.
If you were hired by a new company that wanted to build a new AI product, what process would you use to decide whether it would be best to build a Copilot or an agent or just a chatbot?
That depends on what their user needs and business goals are. Do they even need AI? What are the primary goals of the company and the product? What do they need to do the AI to assist with? Is it productivity? Is it customer support, automate tasks? Where does it need to be integrated? What data can it access? To really simplify the process, I would look at the company's market landscape. their current product strategy, roadmap, and their horizons, and see where the need for AI fits and why it would be worthwhile. And if you look at Copilot agents and chatbots, I would first define what we mean by the terms. And first off, they all play roles in conversing with you and have different levels of intelligence and capabilities. So maybe let's start with copilots. They are built on a large language model. They can generate contextual content in a conversational interface and based on direct and dynamic input. And it can act proactively if configured that way. They're ideal for complex tasks that require collaboration and assistance, like your typical writing, coding, customization, complex problem solving, where the analogy is literal, a co-pilot to a pilot in an aircraft. You, as the pilot, are in control of the main focus of your work, and your co-pilot is there to help you with the mundane, cumbersome tasks and jump in when you're tired and or late. They are evolving fast. They can be built from a kit, like I mentioned, and it can be implemented as a layer on top of your existing product. So easy enough if you're a sales company and using the Office suite, you can integrate a sales copilot to your system and have catered capabilities that are relevant for your industry. When we look at agents, they could be considered as representatives of an app in a certain context. For example, it's suitable for broader, more autonomous tasks like scheduling, reminders, managing a smart home, like your Alexa or Google Home. And they work especially well if you give them access to a lot of your data and let them handle business for you. So you give them the permission of autonomy so they can make decisions proactively on behalf of you and taking actions with a need for your intervention. They're always online, listening, reacting, analyzing real time. And yeah, I think the new generation of agents is growing fast and vigorously. From what it looks like today, there is a proclivity in going more towards building agents. And people actually often ask if there's a difference between an agent and a co-pilot, and I think we're not that far away. But the last one, chatbots, they've been heavily used for customer service in the past decade or two, answering prefab FAQs, resolving known issues, providing information in, your chat. And they're quite boxed in and limited in their capabilities. And their reputation isn't the best. They haven't really been very sophisticated and often frustrating to use. But they can now be built on a small language model, so they could become more intelligent while still being cost effective and easy to implement. So yeah, it's a matter of what that company needs.
You've done a really nice job of articulating those differences. So if we think back then to co-pilots, where it is that way to simplify interacting with an operating system, assisting with those workflows. If we look to the future, and possibly an unpopular opinion, but should we even need co-pilots, or should we start to just expect that software is designed and built to be more assistive?
I love this question, and I think you're hitting a spot there. I think as designers and product developers, we're striving to get there. The way I see it, we got access to this new shiny technology, and things had to happen fast to stay relevant, and quite frankly, to also experiment and learn where we can go from here. So we're building this tangible layer, almost a low-hanging fruit, if you will, on top of our current products to make them more powerful and bring immediate value to our customers. It's also a branding thing, I think, from a business perspective, it's easier to sell a branded product than an invisible layer of your super intelligence, especially if it's unprecedented. So there needs to be something more tangible. And an important factor to consider here as well is the level of proactiveness. People still want to be in control, and too much assistance could be noisy and distracting in certain cases. So offering a level of interjection and proactivity based on the user role could really hit this sweet spot. There will have to be steps toward a more assistive integration of those AI services that feel less like an addition but more homogeneous part of the product. And short term, for example, I could see that being very useful in onboarding processes of complex software like 3D rendering tools, etc., where there's a steep learning curve. So totally valid question. Love it.
Earlier, you brought up value drivers a couple times, and our next guest is actually someone who worked at Spotify, and he's going to be talking quite a bit about, well, okay, now you have these systems implemented. How do you evaluate whether the data point actually has a net positive outcome? And I wonder if we're thinking about the missing layer from service blueprints, it probably is a way to evaluate the experience. And there are trust pillars, there are value pillars, there are risk pillars, and in a sense, if we were to create like a living dynamic document, it probably would be, how can we assess and measure someone's position in that journey relative to those measurements, is probably how I would imagine. That sounds infinitely difficult, but that's what I
Yeah.
would feel like I would need, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It would be, maybe we need a maybe this is the new niche of the product that we've all been waiting for in the service design space.
Yes, we'll make it right here in this call. But I think to kind of close out this conversation, I'd love to share with the people listening some additional advice, things that would help them not feel like this mountain's insurmountable. I know there's always designers, researchers, product people who come up to us and say, like, how can I protect my job? And they don't know how to break into this. Your story is fantastical, literally fantastical, how you fell into it. But what advice do you have for everyone else who's really intrigued but not sure what to do?
I'm sure you've heard this before, and it may be a broken record, but it's true. You need to stay adaptive, flexible, keep your eyes open on the trends. But most importantly, I think you need to stay authentic to your product. You don't want to lose track of your main mission just because you can now add a bunch of AI to your offering. So I'd first recommend build a solid foundation of understanding ethical AI, responsible AI, AI strategy. I think Gartner provides a pretty good starter package of that. And then I've personally found it helpful to go back to psychology and read a bunch of papers on the Wiley online library to help make informed decisions, especially when defining boundaries for the AI to meet ethical norms. Just having baseline principles to help ensure AI products are designed with the user's well-being in mind. Because that's essentially what you need to do. You need to build that trust, to come back to our earlier points. And then I find it hard to recommend a specific AI product, just like the service blueprint. They're just not made yet to fit exactly onto this new AI process. And maybe I'm just not aware of them. A lot of tools that designers use on a daily are now enhanced by AI, like Figma, Miro, so that can help you accelerate your job and accelerate your storyboard, and it makes it easier to pitch your story. Like there's a plugin for Figma to help you generate a storyboard, refine your phrasing, etc. But what actually really helped me when I was tapping in the dark is just to experiment a lot with your own product, with your own tech, in a controlled way, in a very documented way, so it's replicable, and then you can learn from it and the outcomes and make necessary adjustments to improve that strategy and improve the product. I don't know if you want to get into prompt engineering as a designer. Systems thinking was a very helpful skill to me at this stage. You design for it so your customers don't have to come up with complicated prompts and think of, again, the blank canvas phenomenon. You have to help them, guide them, tell them what to do in this new space. And in order for you to help them, you need to understand that. So it's kind of also helpful because you're your own customer now. And what you're experiencing, your users will experience because it's also new. So come from that point.
Thank you so much, Yasemin. It's been wonderful hearing your story. I was so intrigued when I first reached out to you and you told me that you had this magical story to tell. So it was great. And particularly since we were able to dive into service design, because I think it's going to have a lot of influence over the next couple of years. We'll see what the future holds. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. The show is hosted by Brittany Hobbs and Arpi Drake-Figueredo. Subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple to get our latest episodes. We speak to leaders at the forefront of AI to learn how great AI products are designed and how they're transforming industries. To contact us, visit our website, designof.ai.